let's get started. So we have, last week we talked about a lot of the issues that arise during the Gilded Age and industrialization. What were some of the problems that we noted from the Gilded Age? Workers' rights, women's rights. Okay, there is a movement in the country to outlaw alcohol, the temperance movement, the railroad monopoly, safety, workplace safety. I don't know who said that. Was that you, Berkeley? Oh, you. Okay, yes, workplace safety. What about what's the issue for kids? Child labor. Okay, what about in the major cities? What are the problems that people living in the cities are facing? Overcrowding, lack of sanitation, lack of public services. What about in politics? What's the problems? Corruption? Particularly, what type of corruption? Okay, so siding with big business, political machines. If you had the money, you could buy the power and influence of the politicians. So the progressive era is all about fixing those problems. It's all about making progress and trying to address the social ills that have kind of arisen as a result of industrialization. When we look at the progressive era, it's important to consider two things. Yes, we are fixing social problems, but there is going to be a part of the country that feels like this is a little bit of government overreach. If we are truly laissez-faire, if we are truly the government keeps their hands out of the business, out of the economy, then when the government begins to step in, that's going to rub some people the wrong way. Particularly the wealthy, because they're going to be the ones who are kind of restrained the most, but also American capitalists, people who really believe in capitalism, because they see this as a departure from traditional laissez-faire, hands-off capitalism. So our essential question for this entire week is, how did the progressive era reflect both the progress and the contradictions of American society at the turn of the 20th century? This era spans from 1900 to 1920. During this time period, when we'll talk about this in our next unit, we'll also fight a world war. We also will imperialize and snatch up some new territories for ourselves.
The JDH shuttle leaves in
there's a lot of things going on kind of at the same time. So starting with the farmers, okay, when we talked about Western expansion, the government was giving away land out west to get people to move out west. What was that called? Do you remember what that was called?
The Homestead Act.
The Homestead Act, okay? So the government would give you 160 acres of land. You had to farm it. That was the deal, or ranch it, or whatever. What that leads to is a whole lot of people moving out west and becoming farmers, and everybody's producing crops. Well, if everybody is producing crops and we have too much of them, what happens to the price of those crops? It goes down, right? The price drops. So farmers are going to struggle to be able to make enough money to cover the cost of their farm, to pay their debts, to buy seeds and fertilizers and things like that for the next sowing season. At the same time, the McCormick Company invents the mechanical reaper, which is like a harvesting tool that helps farmers basically get rid of human power or hands-on labor, and allows them to harvest a lot more crops more quickly and more efficiently. And so they're able to grow more and harvest more. All of these things kind of combine into this overproduction, just too much crops, which is going to drop the prices. At the same time, it costs these farmers a lot of money to ship their goods across the railroad. The railroad companies, particularly the monopolies, are charging farmers more to move their crops than they charge, say, their bestie in the steel industry or the oil industry. And so farmers are having to pay more to move their crops than it would cost for them to, or really more to move the crops than they would ever recuperate in sales. That's going to cause a big issue for farmers to be able just to break even every year, to be able to make enough money to keep the farm open. Farmers also get in debt. Purchasing new farm equipment, particularly the mechanical reaper, is a very expensive piece of equipment. But in order to keep up with production or the production levels they need to be able to take out loans to buy the equipment to keep their farm going. That's the same exact words as the last one. Yeah, I don't know why. Anyway, so the issue with the debt is being able to pay back the bank. Loans that they take each year, farmers kind of work in a cycle. They plant whatever time of year they're going to plant for their harvest, and then they harvest their plants, their crops, they sell them to market, they transport them across the country, and then whatever money they make on that sale is what they live on until the next year. A lot of times farmers don't make enough in that sale to be able to plant the next year without going to the bank and borrowing money, or going to a financier and borrowing money. So a lot of farmers end up getting in debt that they cannot pay back. They get this loan to be able to plant, but then the price of their crops falls, they don't make enough money, they can't pay the loan back, and then they lose their farm, or they're forced to sell their farms. So the farmers are facing quite a few issues. On top of that, we all know that natural disasters happen, right? There are droughts, there are that's Yohani, he's a hot mess. There are invasions of locusts that destroy crops, there are floods, and one year that you cannot sell your crops is going to wipe farmers out, make them have to sell the farm and move off somewhere else. So they're going to form like a farmers alliance, and this farmers alliance is essentially going to try to lobby these politicians that are in power to help give them some control or a voice in Congress. This entire movement of these farmers kind of working together is called the Granger movement. The Grange was like a social club for farmers where they could share information, they could share equipment, they could share whatever information that they needed, what seeds are doing well, what the weather is going to look like, any information that a farmer might need. It also allowed them to pool their money together. You could have 5 or 10 farmers in a particular area that can all pool their money together to buy one piece of equipment to share, rather than everybody having like their own individual tractor or their own individual mechanical reaper. There's one for the entire group, and they just rotate it around. This helps them to have access to the equipment they need without having to pay the cost for that equipment. These Granger cooperatives are also going to form together for political purposes. The Grangers feel like neither the Republican Party nor the Democratic Party are really listening to their concerns, that neither of these parties really represent farmers and rural Americans, people living out in these really rural communities. And so they're going to form their own political party, which we'll talk about here in just a second. I think I told you this already. Bought machinery together, fertilizer together, manufactured goods in large numbers, or other manufactured goods in large numbers at a discounted price. One of the other things they would do, which I think is actually genius, is if one of their farms was getting foreclosed on, the bank was going to come back and take the farm, they would have auctions to auction off the farm, and another farmer would come in and buy the farm for a penny and then just give it back to the person who had lost the farm. They call these penny auctions. So these farmers cooperatives really work together for the betterment of the farmers. They look out for each other. The one law we've already talked about, the Interstate Commerce Act down here, this is the big one that they are pushing for under the Granger movement. And that is the law that prohibits the railroad from charging unfair prices to farmers. The Interstate Commerce Act requires kind of a payment schedule, or not a payment, a fee schedule, that the railroads are charging a fair fee to every single person, regardless of what they're moving across the railroad. They're going to ask for laws to regulate storage rates as well, because these farmers are reliant on big businesses that own like the storage, the big silos and stuff. Those big businesses take advantage of farmers also, charging them more money simply because they're farmers and they can. What comes out of the farmers movement is the Populist Party. Okay, the Populist Party literally translates to populist means for the people or of the people. So the Populist Party was all about the common man, all about having political power when you are in a situation where you're not wealthy, you don't own a big business, you don't have a lot of political influence. These farmers and other people who kind of feel left behind by this industrialization are going to form together for the Populist Party, or the Party for the Common Man. Now, this is a third party, meaning that our Democrats and Republicans are still going to be our two main political parties, and the populists are never going to win any type of major elections. They'll win some Senate seats and stuff like that, but in terms of like president, vice president, that kind of thing, there's no success there. However, third parties play a very important role in politics, because if you don't feel like, well, let me ask you guys a question. Without saying which side of the political spectrum you're on, I don't care. How many of you know which party you align with? How many of you know, like, I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican? So a few of you have already kind of figured out where you align politically, right? How many of you feel like you lean one way or the other, you're just not sure? Okay. How many of you feel like neither of the two political parties represent you? Okay, that's pretty fair, right? So we've got a mixed bag, right? Some of you feel very strongly about where your political beliefs are. Some of you are still questioning, and some of you are like, neither one of them, because they're both crazy. And, you know, it is 2026, they are both crazy. These third parties are a place for you when you don't feel like either side is really representing you well. And what happens with a party like the Populist Party is it draws votes away from those two big parties, right? If, I don't know, I say half the class said they really don't feel like either side represents them. If 50% of you do not vote Democrat or Republican, that's half the votes being taken from those two big candidates, right? Those two main political parties. So what happens is these two parties have to listen to you and your ideas. They have to listen to this Populist Party because they need the votes, right? They don't want the votes split with a third party. And so the two big political parties will adopt some of these populist ideas, and some of them will actually end up being constitutional amendments. In the Populist Party, women play a prominent role. This is kind of the emergence of women, or the first time that women are really widely accepted in politics, having a voice in politics. Now, keep in mind, until 1920, women cannot vote. So they may have conversations, they may organize together, they may have conventions, but they do not have the right to actually go and vote until 1920. All right, out of all the stuff that the Populist Party wants, these are the 5 things you need to know. Okay, so I've highlighted them for you. The United States, up until 1973, correct me if I'm wrong here, Fletcher, up until the 1970s, the United States was on the gold standard, which meant that we printed money based on what was backed in gold. Okay, what we had sitting in a vault somewhere, sitting whatever. This really restricts the supply of money, or the amount of money in circulation. The farmers want to add silver to that gold, so we can print more money based on how much silver we have sitting in a vault somewhere. This is called bimetallism. I can't think of how to say it properly. Bimetallism. The idea was that farmers believed that if we put more money in circulation, it would raise the prices of their farms. They would be able to pay off their debts, and there wouldn't be as much of a restriction on the supply of money. That's never going to happen. Okay, that first one, they want it. It's never going to happen. We are going to get off the gold standard, but we don't do that until the 1970s. The second thing that they want is direct election of senators. So your senators, every state gets 2 of them, and your senators go to Washington to represent you. Prior to the 17th Amendment, which is passed in, I don't even know the year, 1909 maybe, something like that. Prior to the 17th Amendment, the state got to decide, the governor of the state, or the state legislature, got to decide who the senators were. Well, that really cuts out democracy because the people don't have a voice. And so the Populist Party calls for the direct election of senators by popular vote. And they're gonna get that, I should say, with the 17th Amendment. That is now how we currently elect our senators. They wanted term limits for presidents, although at this point, there's no president that's ever served more than 2 terms. And in fact, we only ever have one president that does that, which we'll talk about in the 1930s. They wanted a secret ballot. They wanted you to be able to go and vote and nobody else knew who you were voting for. You had some privacy in the voting booth so there wasn't intimidation. So you didn't feel pressured to vote one way or another. And I'm gonna tell you, when you go to vote for the first time, you're gonna feel so proud of yourself, but also very nervous. And you don't want other people looking at your computer. You don't want other people seeing how you vote. Especially if you're a person like me and you work in public service. I don't want people around me to know how I vote. I don't want anyone to be like, oh, she's this, that, or the other thing. That's very private for me. So the secret ballot allows you to go in, cast your ballot. Yes, it has your name on it, okay? So it's recorded that I voted for so-and-so. However, I have privacy. When I go in there, there's a partition. Have any of y'all gone with your parents to vote? No? You sit in the car. I don't even know if you can bring kids in there. I've seen strollers, I think. So it's like little desks like the ones you're sitting at, except they're a little bit taller. And they put like a little partition around it so that nobody else around you can see who you're voting for. That's important for voter intimidation. And we're going to talk about this again when we talk about issues with voting in the South, particularly during the Civil Rights Movement. They want the government to own public services. And I'm going to tell you, this is one of those things that's still debated today. In fact, one of the biggest criticisms that people have of the new mayor of New York is that he wants the subway to be controlled by the city so that he can make the subway free. And people are like, what? Like, people have very strong opinions about this. I'm not going to get into the good, the bad, the ugly of it. Just understand that it's still very controversial. Because in a capitalist system, everybody has the right to own whatever they own.
Ivan High School, please pardon the interruption. At this time, we're going to hold students going to the LK in the cafeteria. So LK teachers, we're going to hold those students momentarily.
Oh darn, I bet their extended lunch is so terrible.
Just a heads up. You will still release other students for their lunch as usual. Thank you.
Why can't we be in the LK and have a lunch, y'all? We would have got extra lunch. Anyway, so the idea is that the more government it's barely raining, huh? They're dramatic over here. It's because there's no cover, and oh, God forbid they get wet. We used to get pushed in the water out here, like, be for real, and then have to stay for the rest of the school day. Because our parents were not nice like that. My mom would be like, so your pants are white, but did you die? Did you melt? No, you didn't. Anyway, let's continue. So the idea is that if the government takes over the railroads, the telegraph, the public services, generally speaking, that is giving the government more power over services, more kind of hands-on, right? And we really are laissez-faire. We want the government, in terms of capitalism, the government to kind of stay out of it as much as they can. But there's two sides to that coin, right? There are people who are truly believe in laissez-faire. It's not the government's job. They shouldn't interfere. And then there are people on the other side that say we shouldn't allow these companies to exploit us. We should all own these companies because if it's owned by the government, it's really owned by us. So there's two kind of arguments, two schools of thought on this. Populists want a graduated income tax to tax the wealthy at a higher rate. We do have that. That's passed with the 16th Amendment to the Constitution. I believe that one is in it's early 1900s, 1908, 1910, somewhere around there. A graduated income tax means that a person making, let's say, $20,000 a year is going to pay a tax rate of maybe 15%. But somebody who's making $1 million a year is going to pay a tax rate of like 30%. So the more you make, and it not on the whole amount of money. Graduated means that like for your first $20,000, everybody pays 15%. For your next $20,000, you're going to pay 20% or whatever the graduated is. It's very complicated. So populists are successful with that. We do have a graduated income tax with the 16th Amendment to the Constitution. Immigration restrictions with quotas. This is going to happen in 1924 for the first time, so not quite during the Progressive Era, but these immigration restrictions will start in 1924, and we'll trace those through the rest of the semester. And then a shorter work day of 8 hours. We do give the 8-hour work day. The Populist Party is not able to get anybody into a federal, well, they get 5 senators. Okay, 5 senators are elected in these 5, well, Nevada, Colorado, Kansas, and Idaho all send one vote for the populist candidate in the election, the presidential election. They get part of the vote from Oregon and part of the vote from North Dakota. But no major victory, okay, in this federal election. They get 5 senators into office, though. That's going to give the Populist Party a voice in the government for a couple of years, but it won't stay there forever. In 1893, we experience an economic panic or depression where there's a downturn in the economy. The populists blame this lack of currency, the fact that we're stuck on the gold standard, the fact that we can't print any more money, as like a cause of this particular depression. But there are numerous causes. It's not just that. Okay, let's take a 5-minute break because some of you are getting very, very sleepy, and I know this is not the most interesting thing you ever learned. Let's take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to finish up for today. I know some of you just want to push through. Yes. Is it hot in here?
Yes.
I'm like starting to get hot flashes.